it's nice to have them both at the same time, because we've got lots to do. We've got to speak to Roddy Cohn, if nothing else, about banks. Why are we talking about banks? Because they're in the news again. Feels like they're never out of the news, doesn't it? But the Chancellor, George Osborne, has welcomed a report designed to prevent taxpayers from ever having to use billions of pounds to bail them out. The Independent Commission on Banking, which was set up by the government, said institutions should be reorganised with so-called firewalls to protect retail banking from riskier investment activities. An interim report that the Commission has also pressed for greater competition in the sector. David Fleming is a national officer for Unite, which represents workers across the banking sector. He questioned whether the proposed reforms would benefit banking customers.
I think the real problem for us, apart from the impact on the workforce in the banks due to the selling of the branches, is does it actually mean the increase in competition? Does it actually mean more choice and a better social banking system for the communities and population? I don't think there's anything in there that suggests that things are going to improve dramatically and costs are going to rise.
But Wokingham's Conservative MP John Redwood has looked at the report. He told BBC Radio Berkshire's Henry Kelly that he was pleased with what he's seen.
Yes, I've just been reading it. I think it's a very professional report, as I would expect from John Vickers. It's written with a little bit of academic understatement, but it's got all the main points in it, and it of course recognises that these banks were far too big and that their regulators had allowed them to borrow too much and to lend too much, and it just got out of control.
Well, let's find out what it all really means. Let's speak to Roddy Cohn, who's going to translate it all for us. Hello there, Roddy.
Hello, Phil.
Yes.
I love that little opening there. That's just an easy task, isn't it? 171 pages.
Oh, yes. In layman's terms, what has been said today, the banks weren't really in a fit state to take all this debt on.
Yeah, that's a surprise to any of us, really, Phil. In reality, I think for many, many years, people have been complaining about the banks and their behaviour, and you have to ask yourself, even with Gordon Brown, much to his credit, apologising at the weekend about the banking issues, you do have to ask yourself, what is it with politicians and regulators that when people raise issues of concern against big organisations, it falls on deaf ears?
Yes, and in the scheme of things, I mean, does it really make any difference if, say, for example, Lloyds sell off various parts of their banking business? I mean, I felt they were mildly forced into buying the Bank of Scotland and the Halifax. So I don't think they, would have really bought it in the first place.
It's quite funny, that thought, isn't it? Yeah. Imagine some arm twisting going on. Come on, you've got to take on this bank and make some more money in the fullness of time. So to answer your question, 600 branches being sold off in theory will make some difference, but not necessarily a great deal of difference. A far greater difference will come about if these proposals to make it easier to transfer accounts happen. It's certainly very difficult to move banks for most people these days, and also the banks are a bit like a club. They behave with such a high-handed manner to their customers, and therefore whether you're leaving or joining, you're treated with the same sort of disdain. And I'm not even convinced at this stage that being able to move your account easily will actually improve competition.
Yeah, I mean, who would buy them anyway? It'd only be another bank, wouldn't it?
Correct. And there is this culture that because they are so dominant, there are, in truth, there is so little competition between them. They all pay appallingly low deposit rates to people with savings. They charge appallingly high commercial loan rates to small and medium-sized businesses who are obviously trying to compete with big businesses who are getting the rich off the fat of the land. So there is a real disparity there, and that's largely because they were allowed to grow into the size that they have.
I suppose, just as a final thought, the only thing, as I see it, that's come out of it that's any good is the firewall idea, because then at least you've got the retail bit, which is all our stuff, and then the sort of the bookies bit, the casino investment bank, and so at least the taxpayers protected a little bit.
I thought you were just getting carried away there with the idea it was the bonfire of the bankers, really. I think that's what appeals to you, Phil, and a few other of your thousands of listeners. I mean, the reality is those firewalls certainly will definitely help a little bit, but your Unite representative made a very, very good point that unless there's a cultural change in the social way that banking operates, what we'll see, Phil, is that it costs us a lot more money. The banks will just use this, the fact that they have to have bigger reserves to say, well, I'm sorry, we can't pay you as much interest, and actually we'll have to increase our charges on these accounts now because we have to keep all this money in our purse and we can't use it. And, if anybody's really listening to this, what they've got to really do is say to themselves, just like gas and electricity bills have started to go up exponentially, I think that's what you'll see will happen with your bank accounts.
Yes, they always get the money back in the end.
Don't they just, Phil?
Roddy, you're a star. Thank you very much indeed.